All righty.
Okay, great. Well, good afternoon and welcome to the third annual Some UNC Math Pathways Summit. I'm Tamar Avineri and I'm a math instructor at the North Carolina School of Science and Math and a co-chair of the Math Pathways Task Force. We are so happy you could join us and are honored to host this virtual gathering to share exciting things that are happening across our system. Today, we'll be hearing from our colleagues at UNC Wilmington, App State, UNC Charlotte, and Western Carolina University. Our summit continues for part 2 on Wednesday at 9 a.m. We'll be hearing from our colleagues at NC A&T, NC Central, UNC Charlotte, Fayetteville State, ECU, and UNC Greensboro. The PDF posted in the calendar invitation has been revised, and Michelle will be sharing the most updated version here in the chat. Throughout the summit, we wanted to give you all an opportunity to ask questions and share your thoughts on the topics of discussion. So we've also set up a Jamboard as a platform to do that. And Tracy will be sharing the link, in the chat. The Jamboard has a page for each presentation, one for general thoughts and questions, and one created by one of our subcommittees in the Impact Project that we'll be digging further into on Wednesday. You can navigate through the pages by using the arrows at the top of each page, and please feel free to post sticky notes at any time throughout the summit. The sticky notes are accessible through the left panel. Well, we begin our convening today with a keynote address from Dr. Melinda Anderson, who was just named Executive Director of NACADA, the Global Community for Academic Advising. Her tenure begins next month. And NACADA is a nonprofit association, quote, of higher education professionals that promotes student success by advancing the field of academic advising globally. The association includes over 15,000 members across 35 countries. Dr. Anderson currently serves as the Interim Associate Vice Chancellor for Student Success at Elizabeth City State University, and she previously served as Associate Dean of Undergraduate Studies at UNCW, Director of Pre-Health and Pre-Law Advising at Virginia Commonwealth University, and Associate Director of Academic Advising at the College of William and Mary. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Melinda Anderson.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna make sure that I don't look like my mother and trying to share this presentation here. So you know how that is when you're trying to. I think that I can share this. I have access to share, right, Michelle?
Do you want Tamar to put it up for you?
Yes, maybe that's what we should do. Will that work? Let me try it. I can try one more time. Oh, wait a minute. Here we go.
There you
Can
go.
you guys see that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Here we go. So thank you so much, Tamar, for that wonderful introduction. And I am just so honored to been invited to speak to this group, Math Pathways. My introduction to this work was when I was working at UNCW, and I see some of my colleagues here today, Matt and Elizabeth. So it's so good to be able to rejoin this work. I'm able to continue this work when I was at Elizabeth City State University. And so being able to speak here around student success and math pathways. And today I will be talking about equitable and sustainable strategies to move us forward. We've been in this work for several years here at the system. And so really wanting to reflect on that and then talking a little bit about how we move forward with this work. But first, I just wanted to say congratulations, right? We made it through the semester, or you made it through the semester. Your students have graduated or they progressed to the next semester. You're in relatively good health. Okay, so relatively, I know that some people will say, well, when you mean relatively, what does that mean? But I will just say that you're in relatively good health. The other words that I will say is that you woke up in your right mind. This is what my mom tells me all the time. You woke up in your right mind, and that is something that we should always celebrate. You have gas in your car. Now, I will tell you, at Elizabeth City State University, we have been through a lot, right? Not just the pandemic, and then we had a cybersecurity attack and everything like that. And then most recently, with the protests on our campus, and then we had, the gas shortage, right? And we were all sitting on campus like, are you serious? There's a gas shortage. And so I wanted to acknowledge that, like, you have gas in your car. And then some of you have already may have been vaccinated. And so you are on your way to feeling as if the world is opening up for you. And then, of course, you are here. And so wanting to make sure that we are celebrating all that in this space today. And so when we start talking about math pathways, just wanting to reflect about where we have been and where we are continuing to move forward. So of course, starting in 2018, we've had the summit. And then as we move forward, we had our first convening focusing on academic advising. And then we looked at our partnerships with transfer institutions when we were at ECU, and then again at App State. And then we had a student success conference at the system level that supported that work. And then we are here, of course, in this space, looking at this virtual opportunity to look at math pathways. And so when we talk about student success, I always wanted to talk specifically about how we're defining that for all of us, and so that we're on the same page. So when we think about the completion agenda, we know that it's this idea, this broad reform or this movement, right? Led by either state and federal policies that say, students, when we start talking about success, we are going to be measuring it by these particular terms. And so I just wanted to share what this view of the completion agenda here on this screen. So when we start talking about the completion agenda, these are some of the challenges that I perceive with that, right? In relationship to how we're thinking about moving forward. So the outcomes that were measured, right? They're simply measured either by retention or graduation rates, right? Oftentimes these completion agenda measurements are tied to either the resources or the mission of the particular institution. So for example, when we start talking about if a student was to transfer from one institution to another, that may be success for that student, right? But that's not measured in the way that these completion agenda metrics are measured, and that also becomes problematic. Oftentimes these measurements are not focused on student motivation or address progress or behavior in terms of how they are moving towards increasing their successful outcomes. And so all these things become problematic when we start talking about student success as it's been previously defined. And so then I would like to offer us another definition of how we're thinking about student success. Student success, we really should be thinking about this idea of demonstrating the ability. And so let me come over here. Student success really should be about demonstrating an ability to deliver an outstanding education that enables students to learn, thrive, and complete their degree at high rates and find meaningful work. And when you look at this picture that I see that I'm showing here, this idea of running towards a degree, right? But then the arrow really talking about skills, passion, and interest, value, and meaning. And I think that as we start looking at how we were measuring outcomes, we really started moving away from this idea of skills, passions, and interests, values, and meaning, and really towards this idea of like, how do we measure that we've been successful? When really, when we thought about the idea of going to college was always this idea of skills, passion, interests, values, and meaning. But when we started to try to quantify it, it became more so about the way that we were measuring previous outcomes. And so wanting to return back to the way that we're thinking about the work, the way that we're thinking about the passion and the interest and the values and the meanings for our students, especially as it relates to math pathways, because you'll see as I move forward in my presentation about how it becomes critical in the work that we do with math pathways is that we're focusing on what the students need in order to determine how their passion and interests align with their values to coincide with meaningful work. I shared this slide around equity and equality, equity, and justice, because there is this dynamic that happens with our policy and the way that we work in terms of understanding how are we laying these concepts into the way that we're operating on our campuses. So how is equity incorporated into our policies, practices on our campuses? when we think about what we know our students, who our students are and what they want to do and who they want to become, how are these ideas of equity incorporated into where it is that we want to become? So in the first box, I know that many of you have probably seen this slide before, but the reason why I wanted to bring this back into this particular part of the conversation is that when you're looking at the equity box, it's not as if everybody's getting the same thing, but everybody's eventually ending up in the same place at the same result. The third box around justice is the fact that we're removing all the barriers systematically, and so that everybody's has no barriers in front of them. But I want us to focus really just on that box in the middle. And so when we're thinking about how equity lays into our processes, policies, and practices on our campuses, especially as they relate to math pathways and the way that we think about how we're helping our students become successful, I really do want us to be reflective as we move forward with our work in math pathways on how are we addressing those elements in our work. So our students today, 6% of our college students have served or served in the armed forces. 9% of our college students are first generation immigrants. 37% of our college students are 25 years and older. 46% are first generation college goers. 24% of our students and I'm reading these to you on purpose, I know that you guys can read. 24% have children or other dependents, and 42% of our college students are students of color, and 49% are financially independent of their parents. And then 64% of our students work, and 40% of them work full time. The reason why I'm sharing these stats, I think that many of us know our students, but the reason why I'm sharing this information in relationship to the work on equity is because our student demographics are changing, and a lot of our policies that we have in place right now are not reflective of the students that we're currently serving. And when we're talking about helping our students be successful, we have to think about the way that we have laid the groundwork and the way that we're working to support our students currently in our classrooms, the way that we are supporting them with our student services, the way that we're supporting them with the way that they're even thinking about majors and careers. And so are we taking into account who it is that we're serving when we think about from an equity lens in terms of the way that we're shaping their experiences, specifically around math pathways? And so I share all that to say that we have to think about the context in which we're working in order to make sure that we are going to be able to achieve the student success outcomes that we hope to achieve. So the critical importance of math pathways, number one, the future of careers. This information came from the College Foundation of North Carolina. These are the top 8 high-paying careers. And one of the things that I just wanted to focus on, of course, is that all these particular professions require some level of mathematics. They require some level of achievement in math pathways. Students, regardless of what area that they're going to fall into, are going to find themselves either challenged or going to need to have some level of what's the word I'm looking for? They're going to come into, I'll pick on nurses. I often find myself talking about like health sciences just because of my background, but many students will come in and say, I think I want to be a nurse. This is what somebody said that I should do. This is what the only thing that I need to know about in terms of how I know I'm going to be able to make money, how I know that I'm going to be able to change the wealth and generational wealth of my family. And so they'll come into the college space, or they'll come into higher education, and they'll say that this is what my career path is, this is where my passions lie, not really knowing that math or math concepts or what they'll need to do to be prepared in order to be successful in this career field. And so when we think about how we are preparing that particular student, given their background, given how they've been prepared, what is it that we are currently doing to be able to make sure that we are preparing them from an equity lens as they come to us? When we think about data analysis, either plumbers and electricians when they're coming into the community college setting, or dentists or dental hygienists software developers. The same thing applies. I see a lot of students now coming in and saying, oh, I think I want to, at Elizabeth City, I want to be a computer scientist. But they get here and they say, okay, I did robotics. I love playing with Legos. I've done this work. I've done these things when I was in summer programs, when I was in school. I was in these summer opportunities when I was in high school, and now here I'm in college, and I had no clue that all these things were going to be involved in my pathway. And so how are we preparing them to, number one, have the stick-to-itiveness, or to understand what it is that's before them without just detracting them, and for them to number one, give up and say, okay, this is too much for me, I maybe need to go in a different direction. Number one. And then number two, what are we doing to equitably prepare them when we know that there may be some deficits that lie in their pathway, to be able to support them to get them to where they need to go? There is the danger, I believe, with advising practices sometimes, where we are just so tied to making sure that a student is successful in terms of completing their degree, that they may be advised to go into another pathway because we don't want to lose that student. So for example, the student that comes in and they're interested in computer science, well, you know what, why don't you just major in business, because this is going to just be a little bit easier for you. Well, when we think about the career trajectory of a student who's majoring in a particular field versus maybe something like a computer science degree, or an engineering degree, or nursing versus social work or something of that nature, you have to really be careful about who is making the decision in terms of who's steering that student into those fields, because we know at the end of the day, the generational wealth that is accumulated for that student that can impact that student in terms of how they move forward with their family is going to be significantly different. Oh, this is my little slide just to emphasize the fact that yes, all of these fields are going to use math in particular ways. And so it's not as if you can pick and choose which career in the future is going to not need a level of math skill or acumen that is going to be critical in terms of how we think about how math pathways are going to be important to the work for our students in the future. Number two, closing generational wealth gaps. I've already spoken on this, but Strayhorn, I think, is very important and speaks to this about cultural navigators. It is up to us as those who understand this journey, who understand this work, to guide students, to help them to understand that their academic destination, to help keep them on their path. It is important for us to help students understand that they belong and recognize that they all matter in the work that they need to do in order to get to where they're trying to be. It is important that we all know that until you are aware, you just do not know. And so when students arrive to us in our institutions, they may not be aware of what's before them. And so when we start talking to students about math pathways and what they need to do in order to be successful in a particular career path or pursuit, it is incumbent upon us for us to make sure that they understand how they're moving forward and how successful they're going to be in that particular field. And yes, it will require you to maybe dig deep, or maybe to take advantage of additional resources to serve you in a way that you're going to be able to be successful. But that doesn't mean that you don't belong. That doesn't mean that you won't fit in, and it doesn't mean that you're not supposed to be here. And so guiding students on that pathway is critical in terms of how our students develop generational wealth for their families. And if we keep that in mind, then we understand that we should just not automatically just deter them to move them off in particular areas or ways that are not going to be helpful for the student, because we have to think about it's more than at stake in terms of them just getting a degree. I'll give you another example. So the Clearinghouse just put out another report that talked about the impact of COVID-19 on degrees. I'm sorry, on enrollments. And so I know that we've probably seen that enrollments have been dropping. We know enrollment at the undergraduate degrees, and I'm sorry, undergraduate enrollments are down, community college enrollment is down, transfer enrollment's declining. But what I've highlighted in this red box for you is that undergraduate fields of study have shifted. So when we talk about mental health issues, psychology has gone up, computer science, right? When we start talking about technology, that's gone up. Education has gone up. Health and clinical sciences has gone up. When you look a little bit below, graduate enrollment increases have gone up. So more people are going back to graduate school seeking maybe different career opportunities, different employment. Maybe people are realizing that they're underemployed, or maybe they're just wanting to say, you know, I thought I wanted to do this, but I wanted to change that. So you've got some career changing going on. But what I really wanted to point out here is that you have these fields, right? Especially when we start talking about technology and the health sciences fields. These areas are going to always continue to grow. And these are the areas where wealth gets accumulated. These are the areas where this is the game changer for a lot of students' lives, especially underrepresented students. When we start talking about who is in the pipeline, who is going to college. And when you think about who the system serves and how we serve them, we know that this is a trend that's going to continue to move forward. And so this is another area that when we need to start thinking about equitable ways in terms of how we're serving our students, we know that this trend is going to continue to move in this direction. And so I wanted to just make sure that I highlighted that again for this group. So again, we know that math pathways enable students to take different paths relevant to their programming careers. I know that with the pandemic, the idea of careers and programs of study have been on a lot of students' mind. The value of a higher education has been one of those things that have been a topic of a lot of conversation. And the value of higher education is still relevant. Students, even though that the enrollment has been declining, I think it has been more about the financial pieces, not the idea of why, if I should go to school, but it really is more about the finances. And so when we think about it from that perspective, right, the economic value of going to school, people are going to want to go and make sure that they're going to be successful in being able to not just pay off their loans, right? But then am I going to enjoy my work? What is it going to be meaningful work? And am I going to be able to be successful financially with that work? And so I have these task force recommendations up here just to remind us of not just the designing of the math pathways, but the student support and the advising were also recommendations for this work that we're doing to move forward. And I think that a lot of good work has been happening around the student support in terms of looking at data on our particular campuses to determine how we are serving our students in terms of supporting them with particular programmatic needs. And then also critically reviewing how our structures and policies and processes to effectively advise our students to make sure that they're in the appropriate math pathways. And so I wanted to just remind us all about how our task force recommendations have been driving our work. And so with that, I just have us just to do one quick breakout session, because I do think it's important for us to talk a little bit about the work that we have been doing on our in particular campuses. And so I will ask for us to go into maybe one breakout session. And so I think, Michelle, are you going to be able to put my folks into a group or?
Yes. So just,
Okay.
we'll do, how many people are on here? 48. What do you think? 5 in a group? Is that good?
Yeah. I
Okay.
think 5 in a group. If we can just have 5 in a group. So when you guys get into your group, just introduce yourselves, your institution and your role, you know, faculty or administrator or student support area that you work in.
Somebody
so-
take a picture of Melinda's slides so that when you get in your group, you'll have it. Or everybody to.
Yes, and I can also put it in the chat too.
Are you ready
So
for them to go?
Almost. So
Okay.
in your group, when you get in your group, after you introduce yourself, whoever has the earliest birthday is just going to be your timekeeper, and we will make sure that we send you with letting you know, like after 5 minutes, we're going to pull you back from your group. So, but when you're in your group, your timekeeper 5 minutes. But then really, what is one successful strategy that you've implemented on your campus for math pathways that has supported student success? And so that's really what we want you guys just to talk about in this quick pull up real quick. And then when we come back, the person with the latest birthday, I'm sorry, that will be the person that is going to share out for the group. Okay, thank you, Michelle. You can go ahead and send them out. I'll see you in 5 minutes.
I think you're going to a room, Melinda. I guess you don't have to join, right?
Well, I want them to debrief without me.
So you're going to stay here with me.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Everybody
I'm
go.
going to pause the recording.
Yes. All right, welcome back, everybody. So reporters, if you can, in the chat box, I went ahead and put a link for the Woo Clap activity. Woo Clap, it's wooclap.com, and it's going to be the PP. Let me go ahead and put it back in here by itself. If the reporters for each group would click on that link, and then we are going to, the link is in.
You may have to type the link directly into your browser.
Okay. It says copy the link into a new, yes, copy the link into a new window, because I think I can't make it hyperlinked in here. Right, Michelle? I don't think I can make it hyperlinked in the chat box. Okay, perfect. All right, and I'm gonna go ahead and pull.
I don't know if that works or not.
And then I want to go ahead and share our Woo Clap activity. All right. And so, Michelle, I think we had about 8 groups. So I think everybody can kind of, oops, I think everybody can kind of see this. So what is one successful strategy that has been implemented on your campus for math pathways that has supported student success? And so as they come in, I know that everybody's seeing this. So Fayetteville State's developed different tracks for quantitative reasoning targeted to specific majors. ECU has removed prerequisite courses for intro to statistics, abolished college algebra and redirected each student into one of the 4 math pathways. Standardized college algebra into mathematics, that's at UNCP. Using adaptive learning, Alex, to help students identify and work on their, it jumped for me, weaknesses, there we go. Offering co-requisite support for STEM, pre-calculus 1, Cal 2 at App State. Abolishing college algebra at Western Carolina. At A&T, they developed 2 new courses for non-STEM majors. Okay. The UNCW held meetings across campus to understand other departments' math needs. Okay, at UNCW, they've had introductory stats and math for student populations. Okay. At UNCG, alternative means of assessment. And so Tracy, I'm thinking that's like for your math placement.
Sorry, I'm looking for the mute button. No, I was thinking about alternative means of assessments in terms of what we do in the individual courses.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Awesome. Okay, and then at Eric at ASU, Mini course in the summer as a refresher, if initial placement test score isn't as high as desired. Okay. So let's see, at UNCP, most of us talked about creating new curriculum for various student populations. Okay. Fayetteville, creating a course to help teacher educator students pass the Praxis 1 exam. That's very good. A&T, communication with partner disciplines around math pathways. Okay. Okay, I see UNCC having conversations about old pathways and how they don't meet. Oops. I love it. This is like real time, so it's jumping all over the screen for me. Oh, having conversations about old pathways and how they don't meet students' needs, I'm thinking. Use of inclusive teaching in flipped classrooms. Okay. So this is excellent. So, you know, Michelle, when you think about where we started in 2018 and here we are, and even through a pandemic, right? This work has continued to move forward in supporting students.
Yeah, it's really impressive. And even though I'm recording, I just got a screen grab.
So I'll definitely make sure that I share this page as well. So my thing is keep entering as we move forward. I'm just going to jump back to my presentation. So as we talk a little bit about equitable and sustainable strategies, the one thing that I would always recommend for us to do is to mind your data. You know how when you were growing up, maybe your mom or your dad would tell you to mind your business, mind your data. So where are you identifying your student success gaps on your campus? Is it gender, race, major? What structures are in place that do not allow the change that you want to see? Are they your processes, practices, policies? Now, I did put leadership here, so let me qualify when I say leadership. Is there something that is missing from your leadership? Meaning, is there somebody that's not leading the charge that you need, right? I don't want you to read that and say, if so-and-so wasn't here, I'd be able to get this done. I don't want you to read it like that. But sometimes we do need a champion, right? Sometimes you do need a sponsor on your campus that's going to be able to keep driving initiatives forward. Somebody that's going to be able to collectively galvanize people to come together. And so that's why I put that leadership point there. It could be somebody on your campus. I get that. But I also want to make sure that we are talking about maybe there needs to be a central person that's helping to galvanize efforts on your campus. And that's what I also wanted to include here by leadership. The second strategy is to build accountable communities. Determine who on your campus should be meeting, reviewing the data, practices, and policies for your desired outcome. Math faculty, academic advisors, the career center. You know, when we start talking about careers and majors are not linear, academic support services, institutional effectiveness. I think a lot of people are quite surprised at how the career and the market is moving. And so people who think, oh, you need to do this in order to get this job, that has changed. And so having the Career Center lay into some of those conversations would be very helpful. Determining your communication and recording plan, develop a meeting routine, creating a reporting regime, determining a reporting time frame, generating a listserv. Really what I want you to hear in this box is, what is your structure? You know, it's all good to be meeting with people and talking to them and having great ideas, but what is your structure so that you remain accountable to these actions that you want to have moving forward? And then my third strategy that I would leave you with is building a continuous feedback loop. What gets measured gets done. What becomes an institutional habit becomes your culture, and creating a culture of student success and assessment and evaluation. These three things, once you continue to do them, they become this continuous feedback loop. And I want to encourage you, when you think about these three strategies and they come into fruition, it just becomes the culture in terms of how you operate on your campus. An example of how a sustainable strategy in terms of math pathways moving forward is going to be here with our example of impact. Impact math pathways for African American collegiate transformation. This work came out of math pathways. We knew that there were some challenges around African American male completion and retention rates. And so impact seeks to leverage, coordinate, and expand existing efforts across our system to identify and to address these unique barriers for African American men. Specifically looking at math pathways, very similar to the conversations I had earlier about generational wealth. You have African American men coming into higher education, looking to, of course, have a degree. They know that degrees, the idea of degree completion. I know that I'll be successful. I'll be able to have a better job. I'll be able to have a better, have a career and be able to afford a better life for me and my family. But then when we start talking about this idea of degree completion, right? I'm coming in, I'll give an example, Elizabeth City. Let's say a student comes in and I want to be a pilot. I want to go into aviation. Maybe they struggle with the math. Then they find themselves saying, okay, well, now I just need a degree, right? But we know that pilots make significantly more, right? That whole field makes significantly more than if they were to have a degree and maybe in a humanities field. And so when you start talking about, I just need to finish and with a degree, we all know that there's going to be a significant difference in terms of how that student creates generational wealth for their family. And so when we start talking about degree completion and how they move forward and advance, we knew we need to start thinking beyond just getting a degree and just beyond completion. And so this program is going to have us be able to start thinking beyond that. So of course, seeks to minimize course repeats and rates and improve perception of relevance and utility in mathematics, and also examine social influences and impacts on success of African American men in math courses. And so current partnership institutions are listed below. And so we are continuing to look at ways to fund these program initiatives across all of our campuses and continue to do this good work across the system, targeting this particular population in this group. So that's an example of a sustainable practice that's looking at an equitable factor. And so I think we have maybe time. I know that we're going to be joined by Dr. Han soon, but I think I'm looking at Michelle. Do we have time? Okay, so I think for me, I think it's important with this group because we do have you here in this moment. What types of events or opportunities would we like to continue to see and support with their work in math pathways? And so going back to our Woo Clap activity, I will turn on our second Woo Clap activity, because I think it's important for us to continue to start talking about how will we continue to stay together.
So Melinda,
Mhm.
we'll do that activity after.
Okay.
I believe President Hans has joined us.
Oh, wonderful.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good
Afternoon.
Linda, I'm sorry for cutting in on you.
You're fine.
Michelle, good to see you. I would love to just share a few thoughts with the group, but I don't want to disrupt the flow here.
No, please, please.
We scheduled for this, and so we are good to go. Thank you, President Hans.
Great. Thank you. I'm delighted to be joining you virtually and for incredible work that you're doing. I come by my gratitude here very genuinely, because I was the kind of student that the Math Pathways project might have helped. I struggled mightily with math in high school and college. And it sometimes made me question whether I was really cut out for higher education. In fact, I was telling some folks earlier that I failed a class my first year of college, and it was a pretty humbling experience. It's a terrible feeling for a student to have, of course, and we know from years of research and the great work of this group that we can provide a better, more encouraging, more educationally effective experience for students who arrive at our campuses worried about their ability to handle math. And I think that's especially important as the state grows more diverse and as some of our most critical industries in North Carolina look to recruit and welcome more graduates from diverse backgrounds. I think about science and technology and teaching, but on and on. We see demand for African American graduates who can help lead these industries into the future and mentor a whole new generation of talented young people. But that's only going to be possible if we turn our math classes from career barriers into career boosters. And I'm so excited about the Impact Initiative that's on your agenda and the potential it has to dramatically expand the odds of student success in key math courses across the system. If we're going to succeed in building and growing our, I don't know, tech industry, or certainly the teaching core, a medical profession or research base, that and make it look more like America, it will happen because of the work you're doing here today. And that's pretty cool. That is really cool. So I'd like to say just a quick special thanks to the co-chairs of Math Pathways, Tamar Albaneri, Dr. Beth Baumgardner, Dr. Corey Redd, Dr. Tracy Howell, Dr. Solaire for your work with the task force. I know Dr. Corbett's got to be around here someplace. So many people doing such good work. And I want to support you in any way possible because you're bringing energy and insight with your devotion to this project. And it's going to matter a great deal in the lives of our students and our state. So count me in your corner.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you dropping by and your great words. And anytime you need help with math, you have now a group to call on. The best
Hey,
math teachers in the world.
be careful. I might just do that. There is some math in this job.
Absolutely.
Thank you all. I appreciate all you do. God
Thanks
bless.
for dropping in.
Well, I think that Dr. Hans said it all. And I will actually leave that question up on our Jamboard about what are some things that we can do collectively, whether that's a listserv or ways for us to kind of collectively get back together in smaller circles to make sure that we're continuing to partner and support each other in this work. When I was at UNC Wilmington, I would always say it takes a village to raise a Seahawk. And when I got to Elizabeth City, you know, we were the mighty Vikings. And so it is one of those things where collectively this group, we can pull together and help each other and support each other in terms of how do we get this critical work done for our students and for the state, as Dr. Hans has eloquently shared with all of us today. And again, I just want to thank you for your time and attention today. I hope that I was able to kind of give some energy to the work that you guys are doing, work that I have appreciated. I would always tell Matt and Elizabeth when I started this work that I drank the Kool-Aid. I am so into Math Pathways. I'm waiting for my t-shirt, Michelle, so I can travel the globe. And so just thank you so much for this opportunity to share my thoughts with you about Math Pathways, but I really do believe in this work. It is not just something that we're doing. It is the future. It is the way that we're going to be able to move the opportunities for all of our students forward. And so I just want to thank you guys so much for your time and the opportunity. Thank you.
Thanks, Melinda. And just for future reference, you are mranderson@ksu.edu. Is that
Yeah.
right? For anyone that wants to email Melinda after July 1, I have put her new email address in the chat. For those of you that don't know, she will be leaving the UNC system and is new executive director for NACADA. Thank you so much. All right, I'm
Oh,
turning this back over-
Allison, look at you. I just saw you there. Hey, Allison.
Okay, I'm turning it back over to Tamar.
Great. Well, thank you. Yes, and thank you again, Dr. Anderson, for an excellent keynote address. We were really honored to have you open our summit this year with your excellent perspective, and again, congratulations on your next chapter. We know we'll continue to be in touch. So we now move to our first official session with a team from UNCW. So if one of you would like to share your screen, we're ready to go.
Who is sharing slides for that group? And I'll make you a co-host.
Dr. Tony, Allison Tony.
Will do. Moving. All right. There you go.
Okay. Oh, cool. Hi, I'm Allison Tony from UNCW. I'm here with Elizabeth Kreth and Matt Tinhusen. We make up the leadership team for the Pathways project at UNCW. It's titled GPS for Math, Gathering Pathways to Success for Mathematics. I'm a storyteller, so I'm going to tell you a story today. And then I'm going to ask you questions because I'm a teacher too. All right, so if we boil down the goal of what we did in our project, we asked these questions. What if we had a blank canvas? What if we could start from scratch? What would it look like if we could build our math curriculum from the bottom up? And so for us, that entitled 3 components. Build a profile of UNCW's, in particular our college algebra students, because that is the largest serving course in our department. Figure out what are the needs of every student on campus, and then use that information to develop and propose pathways for our campus. So to get at item 1, we worked with institutional research and a data science graduate student in our department. We got 6 semesters worth of data, about 4,500-ish students, and who started in college algebra, and we kind of tracked them through to see what happened. To get at item 2, we did some group interviews with department chairs and program coordinators from all across campus, and we asked them, what are the math needs of the students in your programs? So not quite as huge of a question as it seems. There we kind of did it at the department level. And then for number 3, in light of what we found out in 1 and 2, we kind of made some recommendations about pathways, and in particular what we're focusing on is we developed these 2 new pre-calculus gateway courses. Again, our focus is on college algebra because most students at UNCW currently take college algebra. So then the question becomes, is it doing what we want? Kind of. Do the departments necessarily want their students taking it? It's complicated. Do they care? Yes. So a little bit of information about our college algebra class. So Math 111 is what we call it. It's college algebra from our academic catalog. It's a preparatory course for further mathematics courses. Read calculus. Is a pre-calculus course. At UNCW, that is 2 pathways. Math 151, our calculus with applications or business calculus, or Math 112, trigonometry, to Math 161, calculus 1. So, as I said, we looked at a lot of data for 4,468 students, to be precise. This slide leads us to a logic problem. Most students take Math 111. 4,468 over 2015 to 2018. College algebra is a preparatory course for calculus. Therefore, by the transitive property, most students take calculus, right? Wrong. No, not even close. This is probably the single most staggering graphic we got from our institutional research data. Now, we weren't fooling ourselves. We knew most of the students, right? We had taught college algebra. Most of our students were not going on to other classes. We didn't know how drastic that number was. We didn't know that 3/4 of our pie chart were going to be students who were taking college algebra as a terminal course. Now, this is spring 15 to spring 18. Again, we weren't fooling ourselves. We were already, we had an agenda with this project. We're not gonna pretend we didn't. We're thinking about these other relevant pathways. Can we get our students into our math for the liberal arts class? Can we get our students into our intro stats courses? And so we were kind of on a micro level doing some work with that, and we're starting to make a dent. So if you look at the last couple of years, we're making a dent, but still, that's a lot of green, y'all. That's a lot of green. So still, most of our students on campus are taking a pathway to calculus, but don't need a pathway to calculus. The vast majority of students doing this. So, well, that must mean it's a more appealing pathway, right? That must mean that students are more likely to succeed in this course than our other pathways, right? Right? Wrong again. So if you take a look at the blue stuff, the blue line is kind of our calculus pathway. The top line of the blue is our college algebra, our gateway course to calculus. 23% of students in college algebra get a DNF or withdraw. Mind you, this statistic is slightly higher than at the system level, which is slightly higher than the national number. For whatever that means, I could definitely talk about that, but I won't. I don't necessarily give it a whole lot of credence. But if you look, it's still, right, even though it is, quote, better than those other two, than the system, the nation, whatever, it's still nearly double the DWF rates of the math for liberal arts and the stat. So why aren't more of our courses, or why aren't more of our students taking those courses, right? If they have a better chance of success in those courses, why aren't they taking them? Now, note, I'm ignoring the education pathway altogether, not because it's not important, it's incredibly important, but we've pretty much got that one figured out. Students who are going into education are taking those classes and they're successful in those classes. Great, right? At that point, it's about the faculty who teach the classes, making the classes better as they learn and grow. So I'm not talking about that pathway at all. I'm focusing on those top three pathways. So why aren't more students, if they don't need to take any more math, why aren't they taking math for the liberal arts or statistics? Well, when we talk to the faculty across campus, they wanted to know the same thing. In particular, statistics was our huge topic of conversation, right? So our non-math faculty, they want to know, why aren't students taking statistics and math for the liberal arts? Well, math placement became a huge part of that conversation. It's kind of, there's widely known miscommunication across campus about how math placement works, what students can take with their math placement scores, misconception that stat 215 is somehow more difficult than math 111 because it starts with a 2 and not a 1. And so there's that. And then there's this other piece that we didn't know was in there, which is students get tired of waiting for a spot to open up in math 101. They get tired of waiting for a spot to open up in stat 215 or stat 210. So they just go ahead and take math 111. Okay, well, that's kind of interesting. And then there's this third piece. There were actually, like, with the departments who actually did want their students taking Math 111, did want their students on a calculus pathway, there were some concerns with that pathway. Is Math 111 doing what we want it to? Okay, so math placement, we can get better with math placement, with communication. We can, take a look at that procedure. Statistics and math for liberal arts, we can kind of fix that by offering more sections. Eventually, we're going to pay some more attention to the curriculum in those classes, but in the short term, we can build more sections in. So then our focus became on that third piece, that pathway to calculus. So, right, and in particular, those are the students who are going to stay in our department for at least one more class. So our focus is on that. So I'm going to give you a zoom in on kind of our current placement. I could show you why there is a miscommunication in our current placement procedures with another graphic that is crazy, but in the essence of time, I cut that. And so I want to zoom in here on this one. So in looking at how to best serve those students who stay in our department for at least one more course, who are staying to focus on that math pathway, that calculus pathway, we had 2 lines that we were taking a look at, 2 lines that we wanted to pay attention to: our pedagogy, our content. Pedagogy, we started piloting some changes to our current college algebra class, make it more student-centered. We added significant group work to the class. We incorporated relevant application problems, thus creating opportunities for students to derive the conceptual understanding of the topics through those explorations versus here's a list of procedures and now here's the applications at the end of the chapter. Fold it through. If the students have content, it's more resonant, they keep it. What we found with some common exam questions with these kind of revised classes and some kind of control classes with traditional techniques, students in the revised sections were scoring slightly better than their peers in the traditional sections, particularly related to the applications questions, right? They held on to it because they were doing it in the context of building what the procedures were. Our second thread was the content itself. So a subcommittee of our department met from spring 2020 to spring 2021 and just looked at our calculus curriculum. We looked at calculus with applications. We looked at calculus 1. We looked at calculus 2. What are the pre-calculus topics that are necessary to be successful in calculus? Well, we found out that that was not necessarily parallel topics. What is needed in calculus with application does not necessarily line up, and not just the difference in trig. The algebra didn't necessarily line up. So that led us to develop 2 new courses. And this is where we are right now. Math 150 and Math 160. Math 150 we're calling, where is it written down? Basic pre-calculus. So that's our algebra course, kind of parallels the current 111, but has some content changes based on our review of the calculus with applications curriculum. Also has some pedagogical implications or modifications based on our pilot of college algebra. Again, really applications based to prepare students for calculus with applications. Then we get to Math 160, which we call pre-calculus, algebra, and trigonometry. This is Math 150 is a single 3-hour course. Math 160 is a single 4-hour course, as opposed to our current 111, 112, college algebra, trigonometry, 6 hours. So it's a net decrease in hours, but folds both of those into a single pre-calculus course. And it's a little more theoretical based, especially in that trigonometry stuff, to prepare students for that theoretical math necessary in 161 and 162. So this is where we are. This is what we've done. So now we have some new challenges, right? You start going, hey, let's shake up the curriculum. You start getting some pushback, understandably. So here's where we are right now. We're in the communication and implementation stage. And this is where I want to throw some questions at y'all. And I forgot to look at what time I started this. So I have no idea how much time I'm going to give y'all to answer the question I'm getting ready to throw at you. I'm sure
We have
tomorrow, Sharmi.
About 3 minutes.
3 minutes.
Yes.
Okay. So we might be soliciting some emails to the answer to this question. In general, we're not super concerned about those bottom 2 bullets. Department leadership across campus, advisors. In general, we have a sense that there's a positive perception across campus. Faculty, administration, university advisors are generally appreciative of what we're doing, and they are really appreciative of us taking the time to consider the needs of their departments. And so they're trusting our conclusions. Then we get to the math department. Math department is made up of diverse faculty with a ton of passion and vastly different perspectives on what is, quote, best. As a result, it leads to a lot of conflict, it leads to animosity and toxicity. Now, we're not committed to this position that these suggestions are, quote, best. They're proposals. And so we're working on that conversation. How do we take these proposals, have conversation, revise, make it better, and move forward? How do we work through, this is my question to y'all, I didn't type it out like Melinda did, it's not super helpful, sorry. How do we work through the conflict to keep the process moving forward? Right? Typically, historically, our current practice, halt the process, table it, bury it, forget about it. We don't get that choice, right? Math Pathways isn't going anywhere. It's actually a good thing, right? So how do we work through that conflict to continue moving forward? And that's our question for you. It sounds like tomorrow I don't have any more time, even though I just cut a bunch of stuff. Is that true? Give me a big nod if that's true. I don't have any more time. Yeah, okay. So then I'm gonna go right here. And I'm serious. I really want input on this. I'm serious. So here's some contact information for me and Elizabeth and Matt. I want to know what you think. I really want to know the answers. How do we work through, one more time because I didn't type it out. How do we work through that conflict to keep the process moving forward? We don't want to stop right here because we know we're onto something. The question is, what does that something ultimately look like? What does that shape? So please take a screenshot of this. Let us know. Be in touch.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Tony. This actually is a perfect time to refer back to the Jamboard. Please put those thoughts there, and we will gather them together and send them all to Dr. Tony Husen and Elizabeth Kreth. Also, there were a couple of questions that were posed in the Jamboard, and I believe team members from UNCW did respond in the chat. So if you asked a question, go ahead and take a look at the chat for the answers to that. But thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yes, and we will again we'll gather all of the responses on the Jamboard and send them all to you, Dr. Tony.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you again to our UNCW team. We'll now hear from our colleagues, Dr. Katie Mawhinney and Dr. Trina Palmer at Appalachian State.
Thanks, Tamar. Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Mawhinney, and I am at Appalachian State University, currently also the assistant chair at App State. So I'm going to get started and then let Trina take over in just a little bit to wrap up and to finish up. So just a little bit of history about Appalachian State and our work in Math Pathways. We have had multiple Math Pathways for students for a very long time. We've had a Math for Liberal Arts course. It's actually an award-winning course that's been on our books and well populated for over 20 years now. We've had introductory statistics courses for over 15 years. And so we've really been in a different position, I think, than some other of our institutions in the system. And so I really enjoyed the first part of our time together today with Melinda to find out, really where everybody is and what everybody's been doing since we're all doing different things. So Dr. Palmer and I are going to talk about what we've been doing at Appalachian, and our work has really been on co-requisite support courses, and these are co-requisite support courses for our STEM pathway, really is what we've done. And so in thinking about Our process, what we've been doing is putting together a framework for others who are interested in developing co-requisite or support courses. And so that's really what we're going to talk about for the majority of the time today, and then share a little bit about what we do at App State in particular. So in thinking about the support courses, I think there's a process that everybody goes through. A co-requisite course is one that, you know, I think has been identified in lots of places as being a nice alternative to developmental mathematics. And it's become a popular structure in the community college system in North Carolina. In fact, all of our community colleges are engaged in co-requisites for a lot of their courses. And a co-requisite structure has replaced developmental mathematics at our community colleges. And so I'm using this term support course along with co-requisite course because there are other structures for supporting students in mathematics courses other than a co-requisite course. So I'm going to use that phrase support course instead of co-requisite, although a lot of what I say might be something that you envision for a co-requisite course. So in thinking about what courses need support, it may be that you're able to look at DFW rates, like Dr. Tony was sharing that they did at UNCW. We did the same thing at Appalachian to identify it was that our STEM pathway that needed support. But you want to think about the current placement procedures that you have for your course. What are the current course structures and scheduling, and who teaches those courses, to then help to identify what sort of similar structures you're going to be needing to put in place for your support courses. And then what are the content concerns that faculty have for those courses that you're identifying are in need. But I think it's also important that we look at the students and think about what students need support. When we began our process of developing our co-requisite and support courses, we looked to the literature, and there's a lot of literature out there about co-requisite and support course design for developmental mathematics. There is less for college level mathematics. But there's some really interesting things that we found in that, in the conversation around developmental mathematics. And one of the things was this notion of students that have the ACT scores or have the SAT scores that graduate from high school. They come to us and we think of them as college ready. But really maybe what they have shown us is that they're college eligible and not exactly college ready. So what else do we need to give them to support them to be college ready, then, is the question. If we are interested in targeting students that are STEM majors or non-STEM majors, are you interested in targeting students from underrepresented groups, or are the students that are in trouble generally lower classmen or upperclassmen? I think that identifying different characteristics about students could be very important in your co-requisite support design. I have seen a recent article that described a co-requisite study, and the intent of the co-requisite was to support students from underrepresented groups, but this study showed that in fact it had not had a positive impact on a positive impact on underrepresented groups. And the authors were reflecting on some of the things that they may have left out of their co-requisite design that may have been important if they really were targeting that group of student. So there's a lot to consider. So in piecing together all that you would need to think about for developing a co-requisite or support course, we've been trying to identify and classify these things. So there's the structure of the course. There's how students will place in the co-requisite or support course, as well as how they place in the target course. There's the pedagogy involved in the co-requisite course, what content is chosen for the course, how you're going to assess that course, and how you're going to assess the students within the co-requisites. So what Dr. Palmer and I are going to do now is talk a little bit about each one of these different categories. So I think assessment of your course is going to be important because implementing new courses can be a challenge. There's issues of administration, right? Finding faculty to teach the courses, making sure you have funding for the faculty to teach the courses, the issue of time and scheduling and all of those things. So it's important to think about what will be good indicators for you that your co-requisite or support course has been effective. And it's something that we've been challenged with at Appalachian because we've been implementing this in the middle of the pandemic. And so we're not exactly sure what that means for us with the data that we're gathering now, but we're going to be thinking about that carefully as we roll forward. So when you think about course assessment, you could be looking at grades. So that means you could be looking at the support course grades, or the grades that your students are getting in your support course. But you also might look at the grades that they're making in their target courses and beyond. We're also finding that we get a lot of positive feedback for students that we think is valuable and telling to us, that may speak more to the support in a way that goes beyond just a DFW rate. So students may show positive perspectives about mathematics itself. We had some folks present at our STEM, at our support course summit in the fall, and they've had students at the community college level saying that it was really the support course that allowed them to be successful in their target course. And then what about students' change in a growth mindset, or a shift towards a growth mindset? And we've put these aspects here under course assessment because what we found in December, when we gathered together folks from different institutions, that folks that were implementing these support courses were actually looking at lots of different things in terms of data and getting feedback from students about their courses beyond grades. So that when you think of course assessment, it might be more than just looking at the grade data. Structures for co-requisite and support courses, there are lots of different models out there. So on this slide, what we're sharing is just a glimpse of some of what we heard from folks who were with us in December, and some of you may have joined us for that support course summit. So we heard from a group that has a 1 hour credit, a 2 contact hour support course for pre-calculus. They have 30 to 40 students that they allow in their sections of their support course. And the same faculty teach for the support course as teach for the target course. They also have weekly faculty coordination meetings. And so there's not just the assigning instructors who are teaching the target course to a support course, but there's also this collaboration that's now occurring across their faculty in regards to pre-calculus. At Appalachian, we have Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 support courses. They are 1 credit hour and 1 contact hour. We allow a maximum of 25 students in our sections of support courses, and those are taught by faculty who have taught Calculus 1 and Calculus 2 before. We heard from a group in December where their Calculus 1 support was a 1 credit hour course, but had 3 contact hours, but their support sections were much bigger than the other 2. They allowed 50 students in a support course section, and they were taught by faculty, but they also had graduate TAs teaching their support courses as well and helping out the faculty with their support course. And then at the community college level, we had 2 folks from our community college system share with us how they're implementing co-requisites and support courses at their institutions. And they actually have co-requisites for a lot of different courses: their algebra, their pre-calculus, their QL or their math for liberal arts course, and their statistics courses. Their co-requisites were in between 2 to 4 contact hours and kept very small. They had 16 students within their courses, and they were taught by faculty who've taught those target courses before. We also were given an example of an institution out in California where they had a pre-calculus laboratory that they set up as a co-requisite design. They met for 100 minutes each week. I believe this institution was on a quarterly system. They had 20 students within their section, and faculty who taught that course were faculty who had also taught the pre-calculus course. So when thinking about the structure, there are lots of different technical details to consider: who teaches it, how many credit hours, how many contact hours, and then how you might schedule it. Because if it's a co-requisite, it would need to be scheduled in a way that it complements the target course. We have a course at Appalachian that is a fallback course for calculus, so that a student who has taken a pre-calculus course then begins a calculus class, but is not being successful in that calculus class, can fall back into this fallback course about a third of the way through the semester. Well, for that to fit the student schedule, then we need to have our fallback course be offered at a time that often overlaps with our calculus courses. So they're just these scheduling issues and needs to consider in a support course design. And then there's the issue of placement. So we saw different examples offered in December, and there were a variety of students self-selecting into a support course And so advising and communicating with advising is really important to ensure that students then have a clear vision of what support courses are, what they're for, and whether or not they would be a good candidate for a support course. We had folks that had the ability for anybody to place themselves into a support course, but with certain indicators, some students were required to take a support course. Some institutions only allow students who place into the support course to take that course. And then we also had spoken with some folks at Clarkson University in New York. And their structure for their pre-calculus, or excuse me, their calculus support is that everybody starts out in the support class. So they don't have a placement test so that students place into calculus or maybe place into calculus along with the co-requisite. Everybody starts off in their support class for calculus. And then as you move through the semester, they offer a test and students can test out of that support course. At Clarkson, we were told that many students who test out of that support class often stay in it because they found it to be so helpful. So there are lots of different structures for placement, and I think it's important to consider how students will enter into the support course that you're designing, as well as looking at how they enter into the target course that you have in mind. So along with placement is your tool for placement, whether you're thinking of looking at high school GPAs, SAT or ACT scores, whether or not you have some sort of placement test, or maybe looking at all three of those things with some potential other measures that you might use. So that placement tools are going to be important for you to think about as you're making your placement decisions for your support course. So I'm going to stop rambling and let Dr. Palmer continue on to move into the discussion about content for support courses.
Thank you, Katie. So I'll start with the content of the support course. I'm going to try to fly through because I think I have 1 minute. So next. So when you think about the content, you really want to think about what the big purpose is of your course. Like, is the purpose to refresh prerequisite knowledge? Is it to support the target course material? Is it to do the college readiness skills? So really going back to that kind of big purpose to think about the content. But whatever method you choose, I also think it's important to be very transparent with both the students in the course and the other faculty teaching the target course so that they all know what the expectations are. We've had some issues with students thinking you're like a private tutor or you're just here to reteach the material that they had in Calc 1. All right, so thinking about pedagogy. So at the bottom, Katie has this quote that she has shared with me that I really like, that understanding is the measure of the quality and quantity of connections. So oftentimes students that are in these co-requisite classes are there because the teaching methods they had in the past didn't work well for them. So this class might include more active learning techniques that engage students with the mathematics to help them make their own connections. And they're listed on here are some examples of some different active learning techniques. All right, so student assessment. The big thing here on student assessment is it pass, fail, or a letter grade? And Katie already mentioned some, I think, different styles. So some people did pass, fail, and actually more people that we met with last December did pass, fail. We actually do a letter grade. It's more based on participation. Some people included more assignments than other. I mean, yeah, there was a wide variety of how you might assess students. I think we'll skip what Appalachian has done and maybe go to the last slide and just say, advertise that we hope to have another summit this December. And this time the focus will be on the content and pedagogy. And those are our tentative times for the hopeful conference. So Michelle, that should answer your question to Katie earlier. Thank you.
And just a virtual conference or a virtual conference?
That's the intention, yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very, very much. We know we just another little shout out to the Jamboard. If you have any thoughts or questions that you want to ask Dr. Mawhinney or Dr. Palmer, please field those there. We do want to take a good break. We know we've all been sitting for a while, so let's take a break until 2:35. So for those who are presenting afterwards, you'll still get your full 30 minutes, each of those groups. So we will spill over a little bit into the 3:30 time, but we do want to allow people a little bit of a Zoom break. So we'll be back at 2:35. All right, well, welcome back. Hopefully you got some time to get up and walk around, and we will now hear from our colleagues, Dr. Beth Baumgartner, Dave Franzreb II, and Dr. Garvey Pike at UNC Charlotte.
Thank you, Tamar. Hi, everyone. So today we're going to be talking about designing the UNC Charlotte math pathways. So we have cleverly subtitled this as descriptive as possible, leveraging cross-curricular design to build a personalized problem-based statistics course sequence. So in our presentation today, we're going to talk about the problems we wanted to address with this project. We're going to discuss the design process to date. We'll present some initial results and then talk about the next steps for this project. So problems that we wanted to address prior to this project, social science majors at UNC Charlotte were required to take a statistics course and one other math course. It could have been any other math course. Students who didn't place out of college algebra were a little more restricted because even though we didn't put a title on what that other math course had to be, college algebra is a prereq for our stats 1 course prior to the design of this project. So if they didn't place out of college algebra, they had to take it. But if they placed out of college algebra, they could do whatever they wanted for that second course. We wanted to revise this pathway to create a sequence of courses whose contents is applicable to social science students' interests, majors, and career goals. So we wanted to specialize this a little bit more to pick 2 courses that were well-defined that would meet the needs of the students. We also wanted to make sure that we were trying to keep in mind the equity gaps. We aim to lower those and the DFW rates within the introductory statistics courses. Right, I'm going to turn this over to Garvey to talk a little bit about our design process.
Thanks, Beth. So what we did was we put together, we sort of have our campus implementation team, which is several of us on a steering committee. And then what we did was we wanted to get together with people from a lot of different disciplines, like essentially all the social science disciplines. So we worked with the Institute for Learning Environment Design from the University of Central Oklahoma, although they have a new name, they're the LX Studio now. And we worked with them and they came in and did like a 3-day, you can call it a summer institute, but it's really a design sprint around what should these courses look like? And so we got together with representatives, we invited representatives from each of the social science areas, and then also whoever wanted to come from stats. And we sort of stripped it down to just start from really nothing, from no assumptions really, and just said, what outcomes do students need to be successful in their majors and in these fields in life? And what do they need to master in statistics to be able to be successful? And it was fantastic. We had a lot of interesting discussions throughout the few days, and we sort of invited people to come just the first day, and if they wanted to, the second day and the third day, and everyone came to all the sessions. And it was kind of funny when we were getting near the end of day 3, and people were like, well, I'm gonna have to, if students are really gonna be able to do these things, I'm gonna have to go redesign my methods course or whatever. So that was really great to hear that people were so engaged and excited about this. To talk, just to dive in a little more deeply, and I'll go into this in a minute, but if we talk about, what are the outcomes that students need, and then what are the evidences that are related to each of those outcomes, and how would they show those evidences, and what are the design patterns for each of the kinds of outcomes that would be required for students to be able to achieve these and master these? So that was those were our big questions that we had to solve during the week. And then once we decided what are all the outcomes that they need in statistics, where do we draw the line? What is stats 1? What is stats 2? What does this look like? And I'll dive more into design in a minute, but I know Beth had some things to add.
Yeah, so if we're talking about changing the statistics pathway, this is going to impact not only a ton of students, it's going to impact a lot of faculty, a lot of departments. So one of the other things we focused on, we sort of had this path of let's focus on the design of the courses, getting all this input, and then another of let's make sure people know what we're talking about and that they can expect these changes. And I think that's been honestly one of the biggest battles, is trying to reach everyone with the information that they need, especially being, I mean, we're all Zooming right now, right? So how can we reach everyone, make sure that they're aware of these different components that we're adjusting? So a couple of things that we did for this. We did include a brief pathways presentation in every department meeting that we've had. So since we started working on this project, if the department has a meeting, we always try to make sure we have a small snippet about math pathways to keep it fresh in everybody's mind. We held math pathways specific information sessions where we invited the faculty to attend those. Most of those were via Zoom because it was this past year. We also created 2 videos. So we have one video that walks you through what are math pathways, and we talk about it from the system level down to the university. What's our involvement? What is the purpose of this? Why do we care about math pathways? And then we had a second video that was more focused on the statistics course. So what does this particular statistics pathway look like? We actually open up the course, we walk them through the projects and all the components. We talk about each piece. Garvey's going to go into that into a little bit more detail in a minute. And then we held question and answer sessions about those videos, and we invited faculty, hey, if you saw something you like, great, come out. If you saw something you have questions about, come out. If you saw something you didn't like, come out and ask us about it so we can talk about it. So we had those discussions. We also are very lucky we have the support of the administration at the university. So we were able to present to other departments as well. So not just our math department. We did give some brief presentations at the department chair meetings, the university college faculty council meetings, and then we were able to set up some meetings with different departments on campus and go and just tell them what we're doing with math pathways. We even presented to some people that this particular pathway isn't impacting, but maybe a future pathway would, just to make sure everyone was aware of what we're doing. I'm going to let Garvey take it back to talk about the specific course test.
Thanks, Beth. So with all due respect to everyone who teaches statistics, I think the approach up until this design and these design sprints, there's a lot of lecture, drill, and kill. And, when talking with Beth in particular and others, colleagues of hers, it's like, there are all these things that Beth had always wanted to do. Like, I want to do team-based learning. I want to do project-based learning. I want to connect stats to big challenges, in the world. And how can we make this more meaningful and fun and enjoyable to teach and for students to take? So that was really, one of the big drivers here was how can we make this class more active learning, team-based learning, problem-based learning, have presentations, that kind of thing. And in order to get there, we were going to use, personalized and adaptive learning, and our platform for that is Realize It. I could talk a lot about that, but the idea behind, if you're not super familiar with adaptive learning, is that students can, each student would have truly their own pathway for mastery of content. So they could have new content introduced to them, and they could demonstrate that they've mastered different skills, and it gives them progress reports and analytics on where they are and where they need help. And it gives them personalized helps on to sort of help them with their mastery. And the reason why we did that was that if students could do sort of the mastery of some of the problem solving and so forth on their own before they come to class, then when they get to class, we can do other things. And that was, so it was like holistically designed. It was not a bolt-on approach where we said, okay, we're just going to slap this adaptive learning on here. So we built the adaptive course, the adaptive pieces from the ground up in support of the course, rather than, it's more than courseware. It's really integrated into the active learning pedagogy, and it's really an adaptive learning pedagogy that's involved. And then related to that, of course, we have to get people ready to teach this way. It's not just to use the tools that we're using, but there's a whole, we put together sort of like weekly guides on, what are the activities in class now that students are doing and that faculty are doing during the semester to support student success and to teach this course and to learn in this course. And then, of course, there's obviously an advising component, right? Is that we had to engage with the advisors who are helping students sign up for classes so that they could understand what the course is about, so that they could get the right students in the course and help students sign up for the right thing. I don't know if that covers all of it. I guess we'll turn it over to Dave.
Great. And I'm gonna try to go pretty quick for you so we can get to the other parts of this. You guys can hear me? I'm unmuted. Yeah. Okay. Across all the sections we had in the fall, there were 824 students enrolled in both the control and our treatment group. And the control is kind of the traditional lecture style, whereas the treatment group was those working in the adaptive learning with more of that flipped class and active learning. So there were 424 students in the control group with 410 registered in the treatments. And we found that there were no statistical differences between the control and treatment group on their final course grades. And this shows that there really isn't any additional harm to the students doing the treatment group, which was a good sign for us. Some other important highlights here. So our goal was to reduce the equity gap in our final course grades. And we found that the treatment group courses using the adaptive learning approach reduced DFW rates below 5%. It was actually 3.4%. Versus the traditional classes having a 9.8% equity gap and DFW rates. And then the other thing to note is the DFW is still kind of high across all sections at about 22%. But this, with the pandemic and everything else, like there's a lot of outside constructs that we weren't being able to measure. So we're looking at that a little bit more in depth later. Go to the next slide. So thinking about the aims of the project for us was to remove the barriers for the degree attainment for social science majors. And most of them are required to complete the Stats 1222 or one of the equivalent courses before they can take upper division courses within their majors. And one of the prereqs for it, you can see there is our Math 1100, which is the college algebra. And we found that those that had completed the Math 1100 as the prereq for the stats course, that there were no statistical differences in final grades there either. And this is suggesting to us that there might not be a need for the college algebra as a prereq, especially in the treatment course where they have some kind of just-in-time remedial style work built into the adaptive learning to help catch those students up that may need it. The other big note is, so Beth talked about it a little bit earlier, or actually might have been another one, and with the stats courses, with the math placement, students can score high enough to take any math course, whether that be stats or calculus. And among all of the students, so the 824 students, there were only 19 of the students that have received a math placement score high enough to take any course. So we couldn't do any meaningful statistical analysis with that group. But it is kind of giving us promise to show that in the stats redesign that we might not need this additional Math 1100 as a prereq. And then you go to the next one. So some other things we were able to do in the fall is we did a series of surveys to the students over 3 different times in the semester to try to understand the students' perceptions. And I'm just highlighting a couple of them in here. And this is the final course survey that went out. And our response rates are pretty low, as you can see. And I think this is because students were overwhelmed with everything with the pandemic and just getting surveys. But we did get some decent information out of them. And here you can see on the left-hand side is the treatment group versus the control group on the right-hand side. And so this one is right here is measuring the student's growth mindset and sense of belonging. And we used 8 different items to create this construct. And while slightly higher at 3.79 on an average, it's one of those things that it's giving us promise that there's something that is happening kind of with the students' growth mindset throughout the semester and the sense of belonging. We have a couple other surveys we want to take a look at. And the next slide, which I was a little bit surprised on, was looking at the motivation. And this was over an average of 4 different items using a Likert scale again. And we see that the treatment group actually had a higher motivation at the end of the term using the adaptive learning platform versus those that did not. And again, we know that the response rates are pretty low, so really in-depth analysis is going to be a little bit of a struggle here. But it is giving us a lot of positive things to kind of think about what we're doing in this redesign and kind of moving forward.
So next steps for our project, we definitely wanted to continue to collect and analyze additional data on Stats 1. We're looking forward to if and when we get back to regular face-to-face learning, if our results will continue to show what they have shown, maybe look even better. We'll just have to wait and see. So we want to keep collecting that data. We want to be sure that we're also analyzing the impacts on student success within the social science majors. So we want to look at some of the data, follow these students into their methods courses, and say students in the methods courses who had this version of Stat 1222, is there any difference or is there any overall trends that we can see that's taking place in those higher 3000 level methods courses for students that have taken this version of Stat 1222. We also want to expand the course design to more sections and more instructors. So we're staying about the same number of sections for the fall, but we are adding in a new instructor. So this instructor will be going through some of the different trainings that we offer and see, can people outside of who is teaching this or who designed it, right, and has been teaching it, can we bring in other instructors and teach them to teach in an active and adaptive way in their classes as well, and see what that looks like. Great. We will continue to develop departmental buy-in and awareness. There's always
Yep, I'm not able to hear you anymore. Did others have the same problem? Yep.
Yeah, I don't hear her.
Yeah, I don't hear her.
Kind of like maybe a mic issue. Something was covered. Oh, I think now I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes.
It must have
Okay.
been my internet connection. I've done absolutely nothing different. So I was trying to type a message to Garby, like, please take the slide.
Yeah.
Did
No,
you
go
hear me
ahead.
on the previous slide or no?
Maybe start from that previous slide just in case.
Okay, sorry. All right. So I was talking about we wanted to continue to collect the Stats 1 data in more what I'll call regular semesters where we might be face-to-face. We definitely want to look at impacts to the 3000 level methods courses. So following the students into their actual majors and seeing if our course impacts their work in those higher level courses. And then we want to expand the course design to more sections and more instructors. So I was mentioning for the fall, we don't have more sections. We're planning a much bigger section rollout next spring, but we are adding in a new instructor in the fall. So we'll be taking them through our training and helping them to see what this course looks like and give them those supports that they need to teach in an active and adaptive way. So we definitely want to continue to develop departmental buy-in and awareness. We talked about some of the ways that we were doing that, but just continuing every time we get a chance talking about the project and trying to get the information out to as many in as much detail, right, for the math and stat faculty and then across campus. We are planning to run the Statistics 2 course. We just built it this spring. So it will run the following spring in 2022. And that, of course, is the follow-up to our Stats 1 course. We also want to look at considering additional math pathways or revising some of our previously existing pathways, just to make sure that they all have research-based pedagogy that's being used, that it's somewhat consistent across the board, and then maybe some of those brand new pathways like a quantitative reasoning or something like that. So tons of discussions that we'll have to have across campus with that last bullet point, but these are our next steps.
Did you want me to speak something, Beth?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, to reiterate what Beth said, the challenge is really scaling up, right? Is that, I mean, and you can hear the challenges, and we've all had these challenges of the last couple of years, is, our data aren't great in terms of like how clean they are. We've kind of been thrown into emergency remote teaching and everything else, and the course is online, and it was really designed to be sort of high touch, in-class experience for the active learning portion. So, personally, I'm looking forward to getting back to campus and seeing how this course unfolds in the way it was intended originally to be designed. But, getting departmental buy-in and to scale this out to all sections, that's a big challenge. So hopefully we can make the case with data and student success. And then, the answer is, why aren't more people teaching this way instead of, please, pretty please, will you teach this way? Because and for those of you that know me, that sounds pretty much like me. But I will say, I mean, I know we have time for questions. I want to ask Beth a question. Beth, what is it like to teach this class versus the class as it used to be, say, 3 years ago?
It is absolutely refreshing, and it has made me want to keep teaching. So you eventually get to a lull where like you've made all the resources you can make as a lecturer, right? If I'm going to go in and talk at students, I've already got the guide of notes, I've got all the help videos, I've got all the resources I can think of to make for students. And while some might be successful, it's just not having the impact that I wanted it to have. And you kind of get burned out. But with this, I see students that come in that, they have no college algebra background, they didn't place out of it. They come straight into this, they tell me they hate math, that they've never liked it. And I see those same students seeing how they can use math and stats. They end up loving the course. And it's not just that they love it and they think, oh, this is great, I can use it. They're actually demonstrating in their projects that they see the connections. They're using the software to calculate those values that they might have otherwise struggled to get, but then they know what those values mean and they can see the usefulness of it. And it just makes me want to keep teaching. And it makes me want to teach every course that I ever teach in this way. Yeah.
I love hearing that. I always love hearing that talk.
You knew it was coming when you asked me, right?
Yeah, kind of a setup. And we're going to work this summer with Realize It. Is they're doing some stuff on their side. They have a researcher, Colm Holland, who we're working with, and he's going to give us a deeper dive into our analytics around student engagement and student mastery of different concepts and constructs in the course. So I'm looking forward to that as well. So they've been a really strong partner for us. And one thing that another thing that the adaptive platform does is it gives the instructor a lot of analytics about students, like in real time, and sort of who's struggling. And one way to think of that is it allows us to see the students in a different way, and we see them maybe for the first time, and the student who's struggling, and it can point us to where interventions are needed, whether it's just a nudge like, hey, you should come talk to me during office hours because I see you haven't checked in a few weeks, whatever that might be. So anything that we can do to be truly more engaging with our students and sort of connecting with them in that way is a lot better. And sometimes it's hard, but if we have tools that can help us do that and make it easy for us and the student, then we should use them.
We have a couple of questions or points in the Jamboard. Would you mind if I ask them to you?
Please.
Great. So the first one here is your group available to help or advise other teams who are interested in creating adaptive learning modules?
I would say it depends on how deep you mean when we're saying help create them. Would I talk about what we've done and give you ideas for what to do? Absolutely. Am I going to be in there typing questions? No, because I'm still typing them over for my own. But yeah, we're very open to having discussions and helping you make a plan for how you want to do this. Yeah.
That's great. And your I'm sure is your contact information on I think at the first slide, was it? Email address.
If not, I will make sure that everyone has it.
Great. Well, our second question was, if you remove college algebra as a stats prereq, are partner disciplines concerned that the students will lack algebraic manipulation skills?
It seemed that most people we talked to said that their students weren't presenting that they had a lot of college algebra knowledge when they got to their courses anyways, so they weren't very worried about us removing that course. They were, and they said the same thing about the statistics course, right? So they're saying when they get to our 3000 level course, they don't know what standard deviation means. They can get a value, but they have no meaning. So they were more focused on, if you can get students to us that understand some of the values that they're getting, we would be happy. And we do still teach pieces out of college algebra that we need. We do that with the adaptive learning platform. So it's not like we're never talking about any college algebra concepts. We do. It's just built into that adaptive platform. But no, we didn't really have any kickback from other departments concerned about us removing college algebra.
Great. Well, thank you. We have one new one. Do you find reading comprehension and CT problems?
Reading comprehensions I can address. Garvey, did you unmute to talk about that? No, okay.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say CT means critical thinking, probably.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to say the same thing. I'm not sure what CT is.
Yeah.
So I think the reading comprehension is a problem regardless of what style you're teaching in, right? So we have to teach students how to read the problems and pick out the correct information. And I would say that the way we have the projects designed, everything is scaffolded. So I have a chance to start in the beginning and show this is what typical information that I'd be trying to pick out. So I'm going to need at least this much information. You can give me more. And these things are, the projects are designed to allow us to actually talk about what happens if I have too much information. How can I think critically about what I need and what I don't need in order to get where I'm trying to go? So I think it's still a very big issue that we have to spend time on, right? Making sure students know how to think critically, but I think it's easier to address it when I have more context to my problems like I do now.
And what are some of the examples of projects that students have done this last semester?
Oh, I might have a slide. Hold on. Give me 1 second.
We actually didn't rehearse that. It's not like a medicine show where I'm.
No.
Sure.
Now, this is a snippet of some different presentations, like all put together. But some of the things they pick to address, maybe they want to address homelessness in Charlotte. And then they have to talk about how could you collect data on that? How would you find out about it? And then they're putting the information together. Another one, we have a lot of climate action types of projects. Some interesting ones this semester that came from the pandemic was effects of the pandemic or effects of online learning on students. Stress levels of students due to the pandemic or due to online learning. So they're really tying it either to their majors or something that is what I would consider a major impact right now, or having a major impact right now.
Well, that's it for the questions on the Jamboard, and we thank you so much for such a wonderful presentation. Any final words? I didn't want to interrupt. Okay. All right. Well, thank you to our UNC Charlotte team. We will now hear from our colleagues at Western Carolina, Daniel Best, Sibley Bryan, and Dr. Jeff Lawson.
All right, give me a second to pull up my slides. Let's go to.
Should be good now.
All right. I'm loading presentation. Okay. Are we good? Can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. Thanks for Tamar for hosting, organizing, and we appreciate the invitation to speak. I'm Jeff Lawson. I'm mathematics faculty at Western Carolina, and I have with me Daniel Best, who's also math faculty, and Sibley Bryan, who's the director of the Math Tutoring Center. We were going to talk a little bit about our experience involving partner disciplines in math pathways. So here's what the next, 29 minutes will look like. Let me give you a quick overview of what we've done with pathways at Western and drill down to what we call the functions pathway. So that's the pathway from which we'll draw the examples. We want to look at two areas. One area is what was our methodology for involving partner disciplines in our course redesign, going from student learning outcomes back mapping into syllabus and lessons. The second thing we want to look at is what we learned about how to communicate with our partner disciplines and how to message them as we went through the project. And then at the very end, we'll do a quick breakout and let folks talk about what you're doing with partners at your school. So don't worry about the reading the fine detail, but what you can see from this graphic is that this is our poster that we hand out to advisors and students, and it is find your major on the chart. That will identify the pathways. And to sort of help in terms of major identification, they're grouped in clusters. like some of the education clusters are here. Some of the STEM clusters are here. And then you can see the business, hospitality, tourism, leadership, management, marketing clusters. They pipe into 4 pathways. One where we have, we're calling arts and humanities. That ends up in our quantitative reasoning course, our math concepts. The next one, which is really our pathway toward calculus, we're calling it the functions pathway because no matter where they join the pathway or leave the pathway, it has to do with mastering the grasp of functions. And statistics pathway, which ends up in our applied stats. And then all of the pre-service elementary and middle grades go in a K through 8 education pathway, starting with our number sense course. So let me drill down to the functions pathway. This is the pathway we'll examine as our example. The pathway to calculus, one of our major accomplishments, I think 2 of us answered in the first session, was in our pathways, we abolished college algebra. So we got rid of a lead-in college algebra leading to a single pre-calculus course and replaced it with 2 semesters of pre-calculus, 1 and 2. The pre-calculus 1 carries a support course with it. It is a correct course. We also built in a placement scheme so that students could enter at pre-calculus 2 if they were algebra ready but not trig ready, and then proceed to calculus. So I'm going to let Daniel talk about the methodology and our design.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm going to walk you through what amounted to over a year of pretty intense work that we did, the process and timeline for involving our partner disciplines in this curriculum redesign in the functions pathway. I also want to mention that any handouts, agendas, diagnostics, back mapping, or SLO documents, we sent a folder to Tamara of shareables, and we want y'all to be able to access all these things that we made. So feel free to, if you can't get those, we'll get them to you, but feel free to adapt those or use them as you want. Anything we mention is in that folder. So a major component for us in redesign was talking to partner disciplines. We thought that was just very important. We were told to involve partner disciplines early and often, and that advice has not failed us. I'm going to walk you through this methodology, but we have completed this entire methodology now for the functions pathway, and we're about halfway through it with our statistics pathway. We just finished talking to our stats partner disciplines this spring. So from left to right, in fall of 2018, we began to identify our partner disciplines for the functions pathway. This was anybody that we saw who was taking college algebra or pre-calculus or calculus. And that sounds fairly trivial to do to identify them, but we actually did a pretty deep dive into the catalog and 8 semester plans. Not only did we want to know who was taking these courses right now, but we wanted to know, when do they want their students to take the courses? Are our courses a prerequisite for their major courses? And if so, which ones? Do our partner disciplines offer other mathematics courses that might be in their own departments, like their own QA course or their own internal statistics course? So we really wanted to know who are we looking at here before we went in to talk to them. Later in fall of 2018, we created 2 things. We created a diagnostic, which is in the folder of shareables, which is a survey of sorts. We wanted our partner disciplines to be able to look at what our current pathways courses had in content, and for them to check things that they wanted, and then to sort of diagnose themselves in terms of which pathway they should be in. So we had a survey to this end that we created and spent quite a bit of time thinking about that. That helped us to send a message to partner disciplines that here's what's in our current courses, and does this fit with you ahead of talking to them. Another thing we created was not so much a creation, but we began thinking about the language that we wanted to use with our partner disciplines. We realized pretty quickly that we could not go in and talk to them about mathematics the way we talk to each other. It just wasn't going to work that way. So we needed to think about a different grain size and I'd say more accessible language, less kind of rigorous mathematical talk and more accessible language. So we began to think about, and the Dana Center helped us a lot with this. They helped us all the way through, but about thinking about this user-friendly language and how we were going to approach them. So then in early spring of 2018, we began coordinating meetings with partner disciplines. The first thing we did when we came back was we created an agenda for the meetings. And this involved primarily a list of questions that involved, what kind of mathematical content do your majors need? What kind of skills do they need? What kind of technology? What will they be doing in the workforce with mathematics? And does that look different than what they're doing in the classroom? So we had a list of questions we created. And then Jeff, who was our department head at the time, sent a first volley of emails to the program directors. And in that email, he introduced them to the idea, reintroduced rather, to the idea of pathways and what we were doing. And we supplied them the agenda and we supplied the diagnostic for them to take. And then we had an ask of them to pick a representative or two from their department to get back to us so that we could meet with them later that semester and talk about their mathematical needs. In late spring of 2018, we conducted our meetings. We decided to group our partner disciplines who volunteered to come to our meetings into groups of 2 to 4 people. We kind of clustered them based on majors and similar. We found that doing one-on-ones with people just didn't give us quite what we were looking for. Actually, 2 to 4 people in a meeting was a really nice way to do that. When we were done with the meetings, we organized our results into big themes. And then we went on in the summer to design, this was a 6 to 8 week summer intensive. It was started out as 6 weeks, but I think it was more like 8 weeks by the time we were done. We were attempting to design 3 courses. We were designing a pre-calculus 1 course, a pre-calculus 2 course, and a support course for pre-calculus 1. So what we did was we took all of the information we got from the partner disciplines and our needs as a department in terms of what these courses should look like. And we started out at the student learning outcome level. So we looked at big picture, what do we want students to have in this? We heard things like, we want more modeling, we want real world data, things like that from our partner disciplines. So all this was incorporated into the learning outcomes. And then from there, we mapped the learning outcomes to specific content. So now we have daily content for the primary course, and then we back map that to the support course. So eventually we had a support course fully designed that connected back to directly to the SLOs. And then lastly, and this is ongoing, although we haven't started this process yet, we've made some asks. We would really like for next steps to be to work with partner disciplines on creating really rich tasks and activities. We would like to be able to give faculty stipends to work with us to really make sure more and more that we're bringing their content into our mathematics classes when we can. We will probably start that with the functions pathway. Let's see, next slide, Jeff. Yeah, and here's just a quick sample of the survey that I talked about earlier. You can see this in our shareables folder in full, but here's a couple of our questions. And then it says, if you check these proficiencies, then you probably belong in the functions pathway. So I will turn it over to Sibley now.
Thanks, Daniel. Hi, everyone. I'm Sibley. I work in the Math Tutoring Center here at Western Carolina University, and I want to talk a little bit more specifically about ways we communicated and messaged with our not only partner disciplines, but other partners across the campus. And to reiterate something that Daniel said, don't feel like you have to strain your eyes as I show you some of these screenshots from our website and handouts. They are available to you. So you can go find those and look at them at your leisure. And like Daniel said, use them for your own institution if you think they could be helpful. I would like to say that the UNC System Office partnered extensively with the Dana Center in UT Austin while we were working on this stuff. So a lot of those things you'll find in that folder and a lot of the things I'm talking about came from those workshops and conferences and came from the things we learned from that. So here are just some general things that I think we all do on a daily basis to communicate with internally in our own departments and units, and also externally to others across our campuses. And so handouts are part of that. And we've got some really good templates that you can find in that folder. We created a website around Math Pathways at WCU with the intention that we would get specific messaging out there for specific targeted audiences. So for instance, faculty, staff, and students. Of course, we emailed, as Daniel was mentioning, Jeff, when he was department head, sent some of those first primer emails to our other partner disciplines, and that was tremendous in getting the conversation started. And then we had meetings and presentations, as Daniel was saying, and conversations across campus at different junctures and with different groups of people. So I'll start to show you some more specific things now that we used. Here are three pictures. The bottom right one you've seen earlier, Jeff was showing you that flow chart. That map of majors for students and advisors is still getting used. I was in a meeting the other day on campus, a Zoom meeting, and I noticed in the background, one of our faculty advisors in the College of Health Sciences had it on their desk, and they were using it to help students. So that was really encouraging to know that they've been using that, even if it's been a year since they first saw it. So that's really good. On the left, you can see some rationale for pathways for administrators. So we wanted to present this material, particularly with the audience in mind. Some audiences are going to need some data, right? They want to know why you're doing what you're doing or proposing what you're proposing. And so Daniel did a lot of work himself. I have to really say thanks here for Daniel he really dug into this and made some specific flyers for us and kind of championed us as we met with different groups. The debunking myths about algebra, that was a good talking point for us when we met with the professional advisors on campus. A lot of folks who aren't quite as in deeply as we are with college algebra have a lot of misconceptions about that course and what it's supposed to do. And so that was hopefully part of getting the conversation going about, why are we placing students into college algebra if they just need a math course? Is that the best fit for them? And so as we developed our conversations and pathways in that document to the right, we had other literature to share with our partners to keep the conversation going and digging a little deeper about why we were doing what we were doing. So we have some more specific. Here's advising day is a big day on campus. And I want to point out in the very first rectangle on this sheet on the right, our website for our pathways is there. So again, you'll get all this stuff after our talk, so you can dig in deeper, but please go to our website, look around. I do have a screenshot of one of our pages coming up too. But we wanted to give specific information that was good for advisors and timely for them as they were meeting with their students to place them in math classes or talk to them about what the next course, if they were in a sequence like the functions pathway, what that course would be, and to just give them a good bit of conversation. You can see the middle rectangle there. We also developed a challenge, a diagnostics for students who place into our co-requisite course. And so we have a lot of information on our website and gave out other information to advisors about that piece of things as well. And then of course, there's another document just after this one that was the same that we gave advisors, except the second page here that you see was different for our department heads and school directors. And we didn't want to just give them information. As Daniel and Jeff said, we kind of reached out with the questions, right? Like, what do you need from us as we're looking to redesign this course and our courses, more courses down the road. And so we didn't just give them information, we gave them some questions to think about, something to take home, and just sort of dig into in their own time and think about what their needs were as a program, as a department for their students. And again, that last little rectangle, each time we gave someone some information or asked for questions, we really tried to always remind our partners that we were there to answer questions as best as we could. So Daniel, Jeff, and I think just about everything we gave to anyone, we gave them our contact information as well so they could reach out. And so this next slide is actually a screenshot from our landing page for the Math Pathways website. So we worked hard to not only give information out there for the general population, anyone that just happens to find this page looking through Western sites, but also specifically for our students, faculty, and staff. And so for the faculty, these are all clickable buttons, those purple rectangles on the right here, if you go to our website, as well as the rectangles in the middle are clickable. They take you to a separate page or pages specific to that audience. And so for faculty, they need to know research. They need to know the reasons why you're doing what you're doing, and they want to know the rationale behind it and the history, the context. And so we know that narrative is important. So we've put a lot of things on that faculty page that go back to the Dana Center's research. Our own white paper that we did when we had our first preliminary internal look at what was going on with college algebra and that kind of thing. And I think, yep.
So what were the benefits of working with partners? You know, in dividing into the two areas, the curriculum design and the messaging, it helped us for everyone at all of these levels to have a better awareness of math pathways across campus. And it really helped in degree planning and advising, and particularly thinking of transfer advising or even changing their major. It really helped the students, faculty, and advisors to see how the math connects with their anticipated major. That also happened in the curriculum design, that the more we can implement rich tasks that use examples from the majors in that pathway, the more they see the benefit of using math. And that speaks to the lots of relevant applications to insert into lesson plans. We got increased faculty engagement, both external to the department and among our mathematics faculty. And it gave us an opportunity to re-professionally develop ourselves as we went, and we changed everything. So everyone sort of had to relearn how they wanted to do the course. We couldn't just keep going as we were. We are seeing increased student buy-in to the reason they have to take that particular math class. So let me look at the time. We're going to spend 5 minutes and do it in 2 breakout rooms. Self-select, choose your room, involving partners in curriculum design. So one room will be curriculum design. The other room will be talking about messaging. Our basic questions are, what are you doing on your campus? What have you tried but would like? What have you not tried but would like to? And what hurdles do you have or obstacles to get in the way? Once we've talked out for 5 minutes plus the 60-second countdown, we'll come back in as a group for Q&A. So let me pop everyone into the rooms, and you may self-select to join a room. And again, the 2 rooms are labeled. One is curriculum design and the other is messaging. Now that we're all just back together, just Q&A, discussion. And while we're thinking about that, the slides will be shared, but these are our contact info.
I do have one question.
Yes.
Sorry. When you were talking about the sort of thoughtful ways you approached communication for advisors and things like that, did you tackle peer-to-peer communication around math courses at all? So the extent to which students are getting advice from each other as opposed to from advisors?
Not as formally. Jeff, Daniel, y'all please chime in. But so since I work very closely with the undergrad students in the tutoring center, I was very deliberate in my conversations in our monthly meetings with the tutors. Hey, this is what's going on with these courses. Here are some things that students might be wondering about. And so in that way, we did have conversations with their peers, but it was, for me, more along the lines of those peers they were going to be going to for support in their math classes. So the tutors, yeah.
The Math Tutoring Center, because the Math Tutoring Center is staffed by undergraduates, that was a good opportunity for the tutors to be on message, peer-to-peer. But that was informal. We didn't put them all in a room and give them the talking points.
Jeff and Daniel and Sibley, I have another question about recruiting new faculty to teach these courses. My suspicion, based on my own department, is that there's a core group of faculty who are really excited and into this. And eventually, if it's going to be institutionalized, we need more general participation. Do you have ideas, or did you experience something different?
One thing we did in curriculum design is, and you're absolutely right, Eric, because we involved everybody who was very passionate about this in the design. And by doing the design, we almost did the design and some of the professional development ourselves. So we learned as we went. One of the outputs was that we put all the materials that we all co-wrote into central locations. And we're migrating to a new LMS. We're going over to from Blackboard to Canvas. And so in Canvas, we'll have things downloadable into their shells so that anyone coming into teaching this will have a lower access point to get to the department syllabus, the SLOs, and even drill down to here's a whole bunch of sample lessons on how to teach rational functions, horizontal asymptotes. Right. We did a lot of writing of that ourselves. So bringing new people in, what we found is that when we took the people who were typically teaching college algebra, we actually polarized a bunch because some were excited about jumping on this, and some of them said, reassign me to QR or to stats, please. And so when we developed the stats pathway, hopefully those people would be more passionate about engaging. And again, through our common effort on design, we will develop ourselves. So it gave the opportunity for, I'll speak a moment as former department head. As former department head, particularly when you look at adjuncts, you have an eye on how well they're doing. And being able to get them into this, offer them all of this material, offer them the shells, but also have this frequent, even weekly meetings during the semester, was a great opportunity to bring them on board and maybe bring their skills up a little bit in the cases where their skills needed to come up a little bit. It was much better as a carrot than as a department head waiting until end of year annual faculty evaluations, and then you have the stick.
I have a question. Do you guys only have one calculus course? I mean, the reason I ask that is because one of the challenges that we're running into right now is we currently have kind of these two calculus courses, our STEM calculus and then kind of basic calculus with applications. And we have some of our STEM majors wanting their students to have the opportunity for both. And the courses have different number of credit hours and that sort of thing. And so it looked like, for example, your business pathway was going, recommending the statistics course. So I guess two questions. Do you just have one calculus course, and do any of the business folks take any sort of calculus?
We historically had a brief calculus, but we lost it along the way. It happened in some budget cuts years ago. There would be real benefits to bringing it back. And when we bring it back, we would have exactly the same problems that you're having.
Mm.
Our partial resolution was to work with advisors that so let me back up a step. Business school itself said they want to be in the stats pathway. Okay, so that set that, and that's why it's there. But then certain concentrations in business, econ, for example, also need calculus. So we have advising, their professional advisors are advised that these students are actually in two pathways. We could probably go back to that chart and make it 3D, and then that would accommodate for people having, a non-planar networks of pathways.
Yeah, I get that. We have some of that as well. You know, we've got some of, for example, some of the STEM disciplines only want calculus, some want calculus and statistics. So it's kind of hard to establish just a calculus or just a statistics pathway. There's some overlap for sure.
Yeah, and another one was many of the elementary ed or middle grades are doing secondary academic concentrations in math. So they would be in multiple pathways too. I can't see the Jamboard to see if any questions came up.
They're posted, but I think partially because we've had time to ask you in person.
Okay.
And
Yeah,
it
there was
looks
one.
like our folder of shareables is posted, right? So everything we mentioned that we have is in there, and feel free to adapt or do whatever.
Yeah, have at it. Just think kindly of us as you do.
Well, thank you so much for really fabulous presentation. Yeah, if anyone needs access to any of the materials that have been shared with me, I'm happy to share those out as well. The shareables were a zip folder, so you would need to download the folder and then extract the items in there. Michelle, did you want to talk about the photo?
Yes, so for anyone who will hang around, please turn on your camera. And we were trying to think of some way to make this fun since we weren't in person, and this is all I was allowed to do was a group shot. So I might have had other ideas. So go ahead and turn your camera on. We may have to do a couple of them. And you were allowed to do something goofy. So the first one we'll do normal.
Oh.
But your normal baby Goofy. You want to just do Goofy? Let's just do Goofy. Everybody's going to do Goofy. Go ahead and do your Goofy, Jeff. That's a good.
Is this going to go on social media channels?
No, it'll just end up on the president's desk or something. I don't know. I don't have a plan for it. It's also being recorded. Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, wait, I gotta do one more because I have to get the folks on the second page. Okay, let's do it again. 1, stressful. Okay, 1, 2, be goofy. Eric. That's great. Okay, that's my little fun for the day. You've got to do something to keep yourself going. If you stay around, I'll read you a Zoom haiku.
Well, we hope you can all join us on Wednesday. The Zoom room will open at 8:45, and we'll start with a welcome from Dr. Corey Redd at 9 o'clock, and then we'll get into our keynote by Dr. Rod Heath.
Yes.
And
Great day one, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Jazz hands.
Everyone.